Welcome to another DragonLance Saga review episode. It is Kirinor Yurth Green the 27th. My name is Adam, and today I'm reviewing the novel Blades of the Tiger by Pierson. Now, I will be spoiling this story, so if you don't want to know what it's all about, stop watching this now and go read it, and then come back and watch it. And then you can yell at the screen if you disagree, and that'll be a lot of fun. Everyone loves yelling at screens, or is that just me? Anyway. I would like to take a moment and thank the members of this channel and invite you to consider becoming a member by visiting the links in the description below, and remind you that if you ever wanted to pick up any Dragonlance gaming materials, you could always use my affiliate link. That all goes to help out this channel and keep this train rolling down the tracks. That's really what it's all about, right? Momentum, building it up and maintaining. I love this novel so much. I loved it when I first read it, and now revisiting, I mean the entire trilogy to be honest, but revisiting it now after so many years, it holds up. It is just as good as I remember, and I'm going to get into it with you guys. I do want to kind of break down how these work, right? I'm going to give you my pre-written review, and then at the end, if anyone's in live chat joining me, throw out any comments or ideas or thoughts that you might have about the novel, about Dragonlance, about whatever, and aliens. You could even talk about aliens. I got thoughts on aliens. I want to believe. Anyway, throw it out in the chat, and then after the review, basically the recap and my thoughts, I'll address them, and we'll just have a good old-fashioned Dragonlance evening. It'll be fun. All right, let's get into it. The setting is after the return of the gods following the War of Souls on Ansalon. Hey, Artie. Thanks for joining live, man. But we are on Taladas. The book is split between three people and their cultures. We're first introduced to Shadara, a female elf moon thief. She's on a job to collect a painting for her speaker, Princess Thelania, voice of the stars. It's a portrait of Sylvanos before the elven nation of Sylvanesty was ever formed. It's in the home of Ruskal Eightfingers, a retired warrior. She's not the only one entering his home looking for art objects, however. A hooded figure, or figures, entered, slayed his dragon pet and guards and a minotaur bodyguard before cutting him down. Later, we learn that there was a stolen statue that they were looking for that had trapped the soul of an old sorcerer emperor called Maladar Endash, the Faceless One. He was tyrannical before the Cataclysm. So she returns with the painting and is sent to learn more about the idol from some dwarves. But the Faceless Ones slaughtered their entire village as well. So she uses necromancy to talk to the dead and hopefully learn something about how they were killed, what this statue is, or perhaps where it's gone. The second individual is Chovuk Tegan, a notable leader figure. His tribe of plainsmen discover that their chief was attacked and his men slaughtered. As they tracked down, they found that the chief was wounded but not dead. Chovuk ends up killing him with his only bodyguard as a witness, and once back at their village, claims the right to rule the tribe. The other tribal leaders, except for one of them, who ends up fighting him to the death. Chovuk actually transforms into a tiger, and hence the name of the novel, and kills the challenger, becoming the leader of the plainsmen. He wants to take revenge on the tribes that attacked their former leader, then turn to the Imperial League to drive them out of their plains. To do this, they seek out the Wretched Ones, goblins that live in the mountains nearby. When faced with their king, a worm goblin abomination, it attacks them. They end up killing the king, and the goblins swear fealty to Chovuk. This is on Taladas, D20. Thanks for joining. The third individual is Bareth Forlo, a marshal of the 6th, a battalion in the Imperial Army. They're returning to their capital as the Emperor has died. It turns out a massive earthquake opened up the ground and many died in the chaos. As the Minotaur General Raykaz Anthern vie for power, Bareth shows his papers from the former emperor, saying that he is relieved of all service after his last mission. This enrages Raykaz, as Bareth is an incredible marshal and warrior, and to lose him doesn't look good to the rest of the empire. Bareth leaves anyway and returns home to his wife and land, presumably to lead a peaceful rest of his days, but he is plagued by nightmares of past battles. Now, Bareth is presented with the merchant Samuel Thale, whose ship was robbed by a Minotaur pirate, Harlan the Grey. Harlan is paid to keep out of their waters, so Forlo went to investigate. He found Harlan in a seedy inn, and after beating one of his bodyguards, Forlo was welcomed to join him to dinner. It turned out that Thale was illegally smuggling goods from the dwarves to his benefactors without paying the required taxes to Forlo, so Harlan said that he would not require payment for a year from Forlo in order to keep out of his waters, but he would want to keep the stolen goods. Forlo saw this as a good punishment for the deceitful merchant, but demands some form of payment for himself. The pirate offers him a man-sized hooded statue, the very one that Shadara the Moon Thief is looking for. Now, Forlo takes it and returns home with it. He ends up putting it in the catacombs as its presence has an ill effect on those near it. Hey, JB, thanks for joining live. Shadara spoke with the dwarven spirit, who told her who the statue was sold to, and after investigation learned about the pirate attack and found Harlan in his ship after having given the statue away. She was only moments earlier than the hooded assassins that had preceded her thus far, and got the name of the new owner of the statue from Harlan before she killed him. She did so because the hooded creatures had slaughtered the whole crew and were about to kill him after questioning. Shadara barely escaped herself by killing one of what looked like twisted and evil Shadow Kender, then jumped through a glass window pane into the sea. She traveled to Forlo's keep and tripped a trap just before shrinking the statue in order to take it. One interesting thing to note is that the creatures that are going around and murdering all these people in search of this hooded one statue are like Kender whites, but they also drain blood from their victim, and it's unclear so far whether or not they're drinking the blood, or whether their weapons are soaking it up, or whether it's being transported elsewhere for some nefarious reason. But it is really interesting that it's evil Kender that are basically the assassins of this novel thus far. The Yuigan tribesmen, led by Chovik Tegan, met the goblin horde, the Wretched Ones, and allowed them to destroy their rival tribe, who supposedly killed their leader. This is starting to bother Hult, Chovik's bodyguard, but since he's the sworn protector of Chovik, he can't really say anything about it. All of these actions that Chovik is taking is predicated on a lie. He's the one that set up the real tribal elder to be assassinated, and when that failed, he killed him himself and claimed it was this other tribe, which is the whole justification for going out and siding with the goblins in order to take this other tribe down. Everything that's happening seems to be sort of strings being pulled by other parties that no one is really aware of at this point in the novel. So upon decimation of the tribal city, they turn south to drive the Legion from their ancestral lands, and Chovik calls a storm down to blast a hole into the city walls, allowing them to enter and decimate the city. Hult finds goblins torturing a human boy and defends the boy, bringing him to the Chovik, who executes the goblin leaders for having done it, and they let Hult claim the child as a son, but he sends him north as they're not done with the war. This actually reminds me a lot of the Mandalorian culture that we learned about through not only the Star Wars Legends comics, but also now with the Mandalorian TV show on Disney Plus, where you don't have to be, and to be quite fair, native tribes, indigenous peoples to North America did this as well. You could just be adopted into the tribe simply because you were captured during wartime, or you were a result of some sort of rape or something like that. They would just take the baby, and it didn't have to be full blood or any blood of the tribe. They would just be families. We saw this also in a lot of, I don't know why I'm talking about all this, but I think it's interesting personally. A lot of UK back in the day, everyone gets all hung up on their family names, but the truth is you would be trading your children around to different families for a myriad of reasons. Maybe you couldn't take care of them properly, or maybe you were murdered, and so someone had to adopt your children. And so, you would have members of the clan that weren't actually family at all. And I mean Scottish clan, like Scottish families, not crazy KKK bullshit. So I just find it interesting that our idea of family is a little bit more skewed, at least certainly mine, to actual history and this novel in particular, which brings it up as well. Anyway, side note. So Forlo was called away to talk with Kaz, who demanded his support for the position of the emperor. Forlo refused and left. He had a terrible dream which caused him to ride for his keep madly, and upon entering, learned about Shadara. He went to question her just as Samuel Thale arrives from the newly sacked city by the Uegan barbarians, and this strikes fear in everyone. They're not far from their keep, and they could come and destroy them without any resistance. Forlo rides immediately for the 6th Legion he just left, and after a couple days tells them of the Uegan army and intentions. Kaz refuses to believe it, but is willing to sacrifice 600 soldiers to defend his keep against the army if Forlo rejoins the army and supports Kaz's claim as emperor. So now Forlo's caught in a bad situation. He has no way out, so he agrees, fine, knowing that the men will not be nearly enough to stand against the barbarian horde, but it's his only chance at survival, and so he takes it. Forlo returns and asks Shadara to help him. If he gives her the statue, would she then ask her elven kin to come and help him defeat these barbarian hordes? They go to a Huldrafolk ring to use its magic and reach out to her people, and they all of her people ended up being killed by this black dragon and a man in robes on top of it. This seems to be the same man who is helping Chovuk destroy the League and is hunting for the statue. They return and prepare for battle, knowing that they will all in fact die and no help is coming. Forlo asks Shadara to take his wife away if they are killed in battle and to save her from certain death. And Shadara goes down to the statue and ends up casting some magic in order to bend the Hooded One to her will. Another one I wanted to bring up. Hey, Anthony, thanks for joining live, man. This is a really good novel. This is really good. Is the fact that this is post-War of Souls. And so it talks like in its own history of Taladas in all of these characters, and it reflects on times before not only the Great Desolation, which was the cataclysm for Taladas. Taladas used to be this solid land mass, and just as the mountain fell down and crushed Ishtar, similar rocks or meteors or something were hurled onto Taladas and broke it apart as well, creating this river rift on the western side of the continent and this huge lava, like massive continent-sized lake in the middle of the continent. So it literally split the land asunder, much like Ansalon. And so they're constantly talking about this. They talk about the days where the gods were absent, and it was just a single pale moon, and all of the magic was gone, and what some of the people did who used to cast magic, learning about earth magic, even though it was earth magic, even though it was unreliable and sort of just random, but also that, you know, there's some people who just sort of figured that the gods left, and then when they suddenly came back, went right back to the old tropes like most of the people on Ansalon did. And just went back to following and worshiping. The idea of magic here is very interesting too, because Shadara, the moon thief, is not tied to any specific moon of magic or spheres. She literally calls upon all of it, whomever is listening in the given moment. And it's an interesting take on magic on Krynn, where, you know, the orders of high sorcery were created in part by the gods in order to prevent massive chaos from the Second Dragon War happening again. You know, wild magic just sort of going crazy. But apparently on Taladas, that's not a big worry, because you know the orders are not a thing in Taladas. And people who cast magic just sort of do their thing. You know, they don't have to swear fealty to any order or god or anything like that. It's kind of interesting. Anyway, all of that is to say, I suppose, that our idea of the confines of magic use in Dragonlance is really just tied to Ansalon. And that's it. The rest of Krynn does whatever it wants. And you could, you know, easily make the argument from the position of the Orders of High Sorcery that every magic user in Taladas is a renegade. So what are they going to do? They can't go and kill them all or adopt them into their order. They've been fine doing things as long as Ansalon has been around. So, you know, for millennia. Anyway, back to the story. Chovuk and Hult travel to the northern wild elves, and Hult sees Chovuk communing with his magical benefactor. This is another point where Hult no longer trusts his leader, but he doesn't really have a choice because in his culture, he is literally just a human shield for this man. He's not allowed to question him. If his leader dies, he has to kill himself after he avenges his leader. Their lives are very meaningless. It is just in order to serve their leader. But he is experiencing this because Chovuk is breaking so many norms of the tribe that Holt doesn't really feel like he should be tied to those norms anymore. Even though he is right now, you see it later on. And this character development in Holt is so incredibly important for the trilogy moving forward that the fact that they sort of Chris slips it into the narrative throughout this novel is really, really wonderful, because it's not just one of those snap of the finger moments where, oh, well, now he's not going to be with him anymore. You know, it's actually earned when he does turn against him. Well, against his tribe, really. So anyway, Holt worries that the black-robed man that Chovuk is sort of worshipping in some way has evil designs that only temporarily line up with his people, and that Chovuk is under his control, which is actually the truth, though he dares not say it until later. They are attacked by the elves, and Holt wakes up afterward, finding himself in a pit with Chovuk and the other elves above him at the top of the pit. Chovuk ended up making a deal that if his bodyguard could kill the Hattori at the bottom of the pit without any weapons for like 100 count and no clothing, then they will let the elves go and help the Yuigan tribe in the coming battle with the Minotaur Legion. Chovuk, I'm sorry. So ultimately, this deal that he's making with the elves fell a little bit flat for me because he only got one elf after Holt defeated the Hattori. The one elf is supposed to be this amazingly good archer, and by all intents in the story, he is, though he isn't really used very much. And then immediately following this scene, it's revealed that the only reason why Chovuk went to those elves in order to barter for that one elf's help was to draw out people in his own tribe who did not trust him and were ready to turn against him. It seems like a long-winded way in order to find traitors, and kind of a pointless reason too, because they don't really ever use this elf again in this story. It's really only for this one moment. And then he just sort of leaves later on. It's just, unresolved, just sort of out of nowhere. I don't know. It felt really weird to me. It felt like Chris Pierson was trying to throw in as many different cultures in Taladas as possible in order to make it feel like it was in Taladas, rather than, it could be maybe anywhere in Ansalon. But the truth is all of the cultures in Taladas are very different. The landscape, the history, the people, the magic, everything is different. And so you don't have to lead us by the nose. You've already set up the world for us. It's a little too much anyway. That's what I thought. So anyway, this is all a trick to draw out Chovuk's betrayers in his own army. Holt does defeat the beast, and they leave with the elf and are confronted by the traitors. The elf kills them, and Chovuk kills all those who went along with them. They prepare for war as the moons are aligning. And here's another interesting note, is that the moon thief Shadara is constantly talking about the push and pull from waxing and waning of the moons and how it affects her magic, even though she's not in the Order of High Sorcery. I really like that, because it tells us that, the structure of the organization of the Order of High Sorcery is really pointless, because the power is still going to be granted by the gods to those who are talented enough to call it. I mean, that's how you can have renegades in the first place. So it really makes me question why the orders are even a thing at all, Anyway, the soldiers make quick work of the goblins once the... I skipped ahead, sorry. So the Yuigan tribe is waiting for the Night of the Eye, as we would know it, but the three moons aligning, in order to attack Cold Hope, which is Forlow's keep. They're waiting because it's at that time that the tide, that river that the cataclysm caused between the Taladas land, that will run dry at that point. So the Yuigan warriors can finally cross that barrier with their horses and invade into the Minotaur Legion lands, something that they've never done before, not in recent memory anyway. And it's something that it's terrifying, because not only are there tens of thousands of these warriors, there's only 600 legionnaires there to defend the keep. So this is a 300 situation, very much so. So Forlo and his 600 men are standing there. The water runs dry. As soon as the water dries, the Wretched Ones horde, the goblins, charge the small league's forces, and they fall into every trap that the league set up for them. Now, the Uegans used the goblins to find out where the traps were and what they were, so they knew how to avoid them. And the goblins are all just cannon fodder anyway. So it ended up working out perfectly. So the soldiers make quick work of the remaining goblins, and the Uegans are next. They charge using the goblins as an example of what to avoid, and they meet the league in battle. Chovuk changes into a tiger and ends up killing Forlo's Minotaur commander and friend, then moves to find Forlo. Hult follows his master reluctantly. Then the waters that the Hooded One raised at Shaddar's request from Cold Hope Keep come and flood the pass. And I'm not talking about 10 feet of water. I'm talking about a 300-foot wave of water summoned from the bowels of Krynn to come and wipe these guys out, a la Old Testament style. Very cool stuff. And I just lost my place. Okay, so the flood comes, and it ends up killing thousands of the Uegans and some of the Legion's warriors. This decimates the Uegan tribes and provides a victory for the League. Chovuk approaches Forlo and his magic fades, leaving him naked and without power. This devastates Chovuk, but he attacks anyway. He nearly defeats Forlo, but in the end, Forlo kills him. He's a seasoned warrior with armor on and a sword, so, how could he lose to a naked dude? Hult ends up choosing not to follow tradition, as he feels his leader was evil and committing evil acts and just ultimately wrong. So he ends up following Forlo at the very end. So when Forlo kills his master, Chovuk, Hult should have... I feel like I'm saying his name wrong every time I say it. Is it Hult? It is Hult. So Hult should have exacted revenge, killed Forlo, and then killed himself. But instead, he made sure that his Chovuk, his old master, was dead, and then he threw his sword off the keep, and he just sort of stood there and started following Forlo around. I mean, Hult is at a place in his life where his tribe is gone. And not just his tribe. That wave and this army took out the entire Plainsman tribe of the Tamire in Taladas. That's tens of thousands of people. Entire tribes are gone. He has nowhere to go anymore. There's women and children at all these tribes, but he's not going to be the only warrior to step up, especially now that he knows that the sanctity or the justness, because they all worship Kiri Jolith, the justness of his tribe's movements are all wrong. They don't follow their god anymore. And so he's sort of lost and wandering. I really, really like this character at this point. So after cleaning up the battlefield and mourning his friend, Forlo and Hult race back to Colholt to his wife. He wants to make sure that she wasn't taken away, or that maybe, other Uegans or something else happened to her. On the way, they see the rider Forlo had sent in order to warn them that they had in fact won, swarming with the Kender specters. Killed him. They killed him, and now they fear for the keep. They arrive at the keep finally after 2 days and find it swarming with those shadow Kender creatures. They fight their way into his wife's room and find Shaddara barely holding off 6 more wights. They end up killing them all, and Shaddara reveals that the statue and Forlo's wife were taken by the Black Dragon and the Hooded Rider. All 3 of them, Hult, Shaddara, and Forlo, are now going to work together in order to rescue Forlo's wife and to get the statue out from the hands of the evil that has captured it. The novel ends with a chapter of the cloaked evil ones atop this ancient ziggurat welcoming the statue and woman. And I want to do a quick note about the ziggurat. They talk a couple different times in this book about ancient times, about how there were ancient peoples or ancient civilizations on Taladas before the humans and the elves and the minotaurs ever arrived. They're talking about the lizard men. Like, the first species to ever walk and have civilization on Krynn were these lizard men. I did a whole video about it, about creating draconians. These lizard men were incredibly important to not only stealing the dragon eggs, but also the inspiration behind draconians in the first place. But their ancient fallen civilization still has ruins here. And it's, again, this is another thing I'm sort of obsessed about, is ancient lost cultures of our own history. And so to have that also tied in with Taladas in the same way that it was always tied in with Ansalon is really, really cool. And then to know the history behind it, because they don't say that in the novel. No one knows. It's a mystery. But if you've read all the game supplements and sort of done your own digging, then you know exactly what they're talking about. It's very cool to have that level of depth added into a novel, so that if you knew, it's super exciting and it's cool. But if you didn't know, you don't really lose anything for it. It's just like, oh, cool, there's another ancient civilization. And they even talk about the Huldra folk in Dragonlance, which is a big deal. These are people who, before the three civilizations came and started decimating them, they also reigned supreme, and they could travel from their little standing stones all across the astral plane and all across the planet of Krynn. But they ended up abandoning their own civilizations and towns because ogres, humans, and elves were assholes, just destroying and taking over land and stuff. It's pretty cool. Anyway, so the evil ones, we learn, actually were the cause of the earthquake that begins the League's civil war, and, you know, caused that earthquake to make the capital city fall in and all of the emperor and leaders fall, which caused the army itself to turn into a civil war and start fighting with each other. They're the ones that used Chovuk in order to fight the League and cause more disarray. All the while, all they were trying to do was distract the rest of the continent so that they could go find Maladar's statue. Very, very cool setup to a trilogy, that there's this ancient order of evil priests looking for their leader from eons before them. But ultimately, they have Maladar now, and all they have to do is unleash him, and then all hell breaks loose. I can't wait. It's going to be great. This was an amazing story. It was tense. It was exciting. It had consequences. It had humor. It had friendship. Chris Pierson is a fantastic author, and I am loving revisiting this trilogy. If you love Dragonlance, if you love Taladas, if you enjoy Chris Pierson as an author, he did the King Priest trilogy, do yourselves a favor and read this trilogy at your earliest convenience. You will not regret it. All right, so where is Taladas now? D&D 20. Taladas is a continent. If you're looking at the map of Ansalon, this may be reversed, I'm not sure in the video, but it's on the upper right of the continent of Ansalon. So you have to travel to the spine of Taladas, which is a series of small islands between Ansalon and Taladas, and then you see the continent of Taladas up there. I actually have a video about my first video, the Lands of Krynn. It talks about Taladas for like half of it, actually. So it's definitely worth checking out because Taladas is awesome. It came out of Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd edition. It was the first Dragonlance box set to be released in the 2nd edition era, and it was called Time of the Dragon. And you can actually get it as a PDF. It's a series of books and maps, but it's all in as a PDF on like DM's Guild or Drive-Thru RPG. So it's on Krynn, and it's still there in pretty much the same shape. This book is one of the most recent descriptions of Taladas. Yeah, this trilogy is the only series of stories that is written about Taladas, and it's after the War of Souls. So it's the most recent time period of Dragonlance that 5th edition is not even going to touch because they're going back to War of the Lands. Thank you, Artie. I appreciate it. So you have a question. Any resources you could point to that have the ancient history of Krynn's lizard folk? Yes. Dragons of Krynn is a 3.5 edition source book. Let me think. Is there anything else that would be good for that? I think Dragons of Krynn is where I referenced everything for my episode on that. And I think it has everything you're going to need for it. But again, it's like narrative. So it doesn't go into like day-to-day life or leaders or anything like that. It just talks about the race and how they evolved pre-humans, elves, and ogres, and then what happened to them when the dragons were created and put onto Krynn, and how they were sort of enslaved, but the dragons actually taught them culture and civilization. Very much like, like biblical tells, like the Book of Enoch, for example, if you're talking about Apocrypha, where the fallen angels from heaven were ended up being the teachers of mankind and taught them agriculture and husbandry and mathematics and science and stuff. So it's very, very interesting how these stories sort of mimic our own tales and fables of our own human culture in a lot of different ways. It's kind of cool. Anyway, I digress again. Anything else, guys, you want to talk about? I really do love this, not only because it is a different era, area on Krynn to explore, but it does still feel very much like Dragonlance, even though the cultures are foreign. There's enough to bind it together. The gods all have different names, but they're familiar enough that you know exactly who they're talking about. Oh, and it's like buried in my bookshelf. In the back of it, it's all new languages. So in the back of it, it has a breakdown of what all these major words are being used in the novel and what they actually mean. It has a dictionary in the back of it to help you understand. You don't really need it because contextually you understand what the words mean, but it's a nice little resource to understand what do Taladas cultures call the different gods. What names do they go by? What do they call the moons? How do they refer to their different organizational structures and stuff? So it's just nice little cheat sheet, as it were. Skull Cowboy, thanks for joining live. Yes, it was so good. There's so many. Yeah, this book had a lot of magical language in it. I'm afraid there's not anything close to a lexicon, though. I think authors just sort of make up whatever they want to make up. Sort of nonsensical, by a vowel and consonant type words. Something that sounds magical in their head as they're typing it out. I definitely don't think there's like some sort of cheat sheet of these are the spells and these are the magic words you need. The closest we're going to get is what we got from Chronicles and Legends, because Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman did actually care that much about it. I'm not sure the other writers ever did. Yeah, Shirak and Dulac. That's straight up it, man. Chris S., thanks for joining live. You just found this. Looking forward to the lore of this. You're going to love this. Honestly, like if you love Dragonlance, you're going to love this novel. It's that good. I've never met anyone who does not sing praises for Chris Pierson, the author. His King Priest trilogy is amazing. And I'm going to eventually do that trilogy as well. Everything he's done that I've ever read, I've been wildly impressed with. He's definitely one of the top Dragonlance authors, hands down. One of the top, not the top. Okay, anyway, that's it for my review of Blades of the Tiger by Chris Pierson. What do you think of the continent of Taladas? Have you ever played a campaign there? You can email me at info@dlsaga.com or comment below. I would like to take a moment and remind you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, ring the bell to get notified about upcoming videos, and click the like button. This all goes to help other Dragonlance fans learn about this channel and its content. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the DragonLance Saga. Thank you for joining me in the celebration. Once again, my name is Adam from DragonLance Saga, and until next time, Slán. Yes, Anthony, that's true. Darkwing Krynn video game is in Taladas. And there's comics in Taladas, too.